Well, it looks like the song of the summer is going to be the Taliban national anthem. Oh, wait. There is no Taliban national anthem because they outlawed music. Yes, I talked about Afghanistan a bit yesterday, but that was mostly a subset of the Afghanistan issue. It was people, in, I guess, conservative news spaces trying to, blame things on Joe Biden, what was going on. And in reality, of course, this was always inevitable. We all knew this. And now, today, the next day after I made that video, the day has arrived. Kabul has fallen. Ashraf Ghani has fled the country. He's gone. He's not coming back. Hamid Karzai says he's staying. And he posted a picture of himself with a bunch of his daughters not wearing headscarves. Very daring of him. That's going to change very soon. There were advertisements on the sides of department stores showing, women wearing fashion and not covering their heads, and those were already being painted over with white paint. So a new sheriff is in town. And his name, well, to be honest, I don't know what his name is, but I do know his title, and that title will be the Emir, or Prince. As soon as the next few hours, Afghanistan will officially return to its former status, its pre-9/11 status, as an Islamic Emirate, which I believe it was only controlled by the Taliban for about 4 years before 9/11, and it took the Taliban that long to seize power in the country. They had been fighting ever since really the 70s against the Soviet Union with the backing of the United States. They finally come to power in 97, because even though the Soviets withdrew back in the late 80s, or was it right around 1990? Actually, I think it was 89. And then 2 years later, the Soviets collapsed. Soviet Union was defeated. The Taliban then had to consolidate power and conquer the rest of the country, particularly the Northern Alliance, which became the U.S. allies when the U.S. moved in there. And in 97, they finally conquered the whole country, and they said, okay, we're declaring our Islamic Emirate, and our Emir is going to be Mullah Omar. And so the last 20 years, after 2001, the U.S. came in and smashed that, knocked them over, killed Mullah Omar, and established the American Raj in Afghanistan, which literally could not survive even... it could not even survive until the withdrawal of the U.S. from Afghanistan, which was officially supposed to be September 11th. We're just shy of a month early than that, and they were not able to hold things together. And so the U.S. now is having to flee. We've been seeing all day helicopters lifting off from the rooftop of the embassy, and I chuckle. I mean, this is a very serious situation. It's very sad for people who are there, but it's so absurd. You have to laugh to keep from crying. For the last week, people have been already making these Saigon analogies and saying, "Oh my gosh, this is just going to be like the fall of Saigon." There's going to be helicopters lifting off and rescuing people from the rooftop embassy, or from the rooftop of the embassy. And the Biden administration specifically said, no, this is not going to be like Saigon. We're not going to have helicopters lifting off from rooftops of the embassy. And then that literally happened. You couldn't plan ahead even enough to avoid that photo op. You couldn't look ahead enough and say, hey, you know what, this is going to get bad. Let's load everybody onto a bus and get them out of here so that we don't have to use helicopters. But they didn't, and they're acting like they're surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, we have to rescue everyone. We have to get them out of here quick. And, they're surrounding the building. We got to fly helicopters in there to get all the civilians out. And then you see people rushing into these American military planes and climbing on board, and it's pandemonium. And it's like, why is this happening? We had so much notice. The deal was signed last year, like February of 2020. And so there's been more than a year. Anyone who didn't want to live under Taliban rule should have been making their plans to leave a long time ago. We're seeing these scenes of people rushing in to the American embassy and trying to apply for visas. Like on the last day, like, you're not getting out of here. I mean, what have you been waiting for all this time? I mean, did the supporters of the American regime in Kabul just think that the U.S. was never going to leave? Did they think that their government that the U.S. had established had any teeth to it, and it wasn't just a total, puppet regime paper tiger? Now, if all that wasn't absurd enough, we have neocons slash neolibs slash, I guess you just call them the consensus crowd, journos, think tank types, people who write for the Atlantic magazine, the scum of the earth, basically, people who are, in my opinion, probably worse than the Taliban, and I'm not a fan of the Taliban. Folks like Richard Engel of NBC News, who had the gall to tweet out that today, he was walking around Kabul and he was feeling ashamed because people were staring at him, and because they know that, it's America's fault, that the Taliban are going to overrun them, and that America is abandoning peace and freedom, and leaving these people to suffer with chaos and war and the Taliban. I mean, just utter nonsense. As if if there was any real substantial opposition to the Taliban, the army that was specifically organized to do nothing other than fight the Taliban, that the U.S. invested $2 trillion and 20 years of training into, there would have been some of those guys who actually put up a fight. They wouldn't have all just immediately surrendered. If there was some substantial population of the country in Afghanistan that had any desire to not be ruled by the Taliban. And Afghanistan's a lot like Yugoslavia, or one of those other, or Iraq, or any of these other countries where you have a bunch of tribes and ethnicities that don't speak the same language and don't have the same culture, and generally would not like to be ruled by each other. Well, obviously, those feelings in Afghanistan are not strong enough to motivate those various groups to actually put up a fight against the Taliban. There has been no resistance. They just completely swept across the country in a matter of days rather than weeks or even months. It was estimated that this would take months by the wizards of smart in our intelligence community. And it did not take months. It was not a matter of months. It was not a matter of weeks. It was a matter of days. And that is proof positive that there is next to zero resistance to Taliban rule in Afghanistan. This whole charade of the I guess they called it the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, which, again, it's funny. The U.S. was supposed to be there to promote, democracy and all this stuff, and what do they come up with? They still come up with something that is officially a theocratic regime, a Islamic republic, which didn't even have an American-style government. It had, a Westminster-style parliamentary system. This was not a country that was in any way, it was not a regime that was modeled on Washington or the United States. It had nothing in common with us. It was, it wasn't a good system in and of itself. They couldn't, and so, I mean, there was just, it was all a sham. That's what we're witnessing now. It's all falling apart because it never existed to begin with. None of it was real. The Taliban takeover of Afghanistan is akin to the fall of the Berlin Wall. As soon as the wall was gone and people were no longer separated from the West, East Germany ceased to exist. It just went poof. It disappeared. It was never there. It wasn't real. It was fake. It was an artificial regime being propped up by a foreign power. The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan was no more a government than the Confederation of the Rhine. And so with all that said, hopefully the country of Afghanistan does come to a resting point. If you think about it, the young men who would be, the foot soldiers in the Taliban army now, were don't remember what it was like before this current war was started. And among the leaders of the Taliban, there are probably scarce few men who remember peacetime at all. The last time that there was peace in Afghanistan was the 70s, the early 70s, I believe. So I would tend to think that this entire country is tired of fighting, and perhaps now they can all get on with their lives. Oh, and again, this is another thing that is so ridiculous, and something that I think only concerns the ridiculous Beltway bubble occupants, people who live in Washington, or people who, in this case, have worked a lot in Kabul, and just, they exist in this artificial American Raj bubble. There is concern that, oh, well, now that the Taliban's back in power, we're going to have another 9/11. See, I mean, I can't even get through the sentence because it's so ridiculous. But there are people who still buy into the sort of misinformation that was propagated by the Bush administration after 9/11 because they wanted to invade Afghanistan, that the Taliban had something to do with 9/11, even though that was Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda and the Taliban, they weren't the best of friends, but yeah, Al Qaeda was there, but Al Qaeda's in a lot of countries. But just in case there's anyone listening who actually thinks this way or has been fooled by these people, Al Qaeda exists in a lot of countries right now, a lot more than they did before 2001. If they wanted to plan another 9/11, they could do it from anywhere. They don't need the Taliban to be in power in Kabul in order for Al Qaeda to exist. So that's it. This is the end of this chapter. I think there was somebody who pointed out that the Soviet Union collapsed just about 2 years after withdrawing from Afghanistan. I won't say that that's guaranteed in this case with the United States, but I wouldn't be surprised. The U.S. and Russia, or I should say the Soviet Union, upon pulling out of Afghanistan, they were far worse off than they were when they initially went into that country. They each, upon pulling out, or on the brink of collapse. The U.S. is not in a strong position. The U.S. has no more strong national culture or anything like that. There is no unity in this country. People go out of their way to pick fights with their fellow American. They find new ways to divide themselves all the time. And eventually there will come some trial. There will be some challenge which presents itself to the American people, and they will not be able to overcome that. And at that moment, the American system will truly unravel. And it will likely disappear just as spectacularly and quickly as Afghanistan has. The United States, when its time comes, will merely cease to exist overnight. It will go from 50 states and the greatest empire in human history. Well, I guess that's debatable, but big, powerful global superpower to nothing. But I will do my best to monitor that situation so that maybe we have a bit more warning. I mean, certainly there was plenty of warning when it comes to Afghanistan. But with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.